Well, we're so excited to be talking to you. And even my dog was like wanting to join. She normally
I
doesn't
love
want
your
to sit on my
dog.
lap. And she was like, "It's Amy Berryman. I want to be on your lap."
Oh, it's so sweet. Well, thank you
Uh,
so much. I'm honored to be talking to you. I'm a huge fan, and this is just really cool. And I listened to one of your other interviews, and it was amazing. I got so much out of it as a writer, so it
well,
was.
that's so nice to hear. Thank you. Yeah, I feel very lucky. It's just been, this has been such a passion project for me and for the whole company. We all love reading and we all love going to theater. And, so it's just been like, it's been so fun to get to talk to all these people that I really admire their work and kind of hear the process and hear what goes into it for everyone because it's so easy for all of us to go and either read the novel or see the play and go like, well, that's really cool and really enjoy it, but not really know what it takes to actually build
Yeah.
something kind of brick by brick to get it to the place where people are ready to share it with the world like that. So, um, yeah. So anyway, I was very excited when I was sent Walden. I fell in love with it. I was kind of very sad that it was already optioned by a production
I
company
know,
because
totally.
I was like, this is a great movie.
Oh,
Um,
thank you.
but I'm going to start by just saying, like, excuse some of my ignorance in terms of just not knowing how often it's been performed. So let me just dig in a little bit there. Like, has this had like a workshop production? Has this been put up in New York or somewhere else? Like, what's sort of the history of the project right now?
Oh my goodness. Well, it's quite a story. It's had quite a little journey so far. I started writing it in 2016. I started as an actor and then moved towards writing because I'm just such a like go-getter, need to have things to do kind of person. And as an actor, I was just a little sick of waiting around for things, and then also found that I like really had a lot to say. And so Walden was my second full-length play, and was writing it in 2016. Heard the first draft like the day after the 2016 election.
Oh, wow.
From there, it was lucky to have a lot of workshops, like a lot of it got into some really great theater conferences, and I was able to see it in reading form in front of audiences and work with different directors, and that really informed the development of it. And then it was going to have a world premiere at a theater in Philadelphia, or in the Philadelphia area. And in the middle of 2020, when I'm like, that went away and was like, well, what will my life in the theater be? Um, Sonia Friedman, who's a huge UK theater producer, just like one of the very, very best, read it, loved it, and said, I want to put this on the West End
Oh,
when we come back from COVID. And she was
wow.
like one of the only people at the time that well, in the UK, they were really eager to get things running soon. And so it was originally pitched as like this very kind of bare bones thing that maybe we would also film and it would be socially distanced, and it was going to happen in November 2020. And of course, that got pushed, but it did finally happen in spring of 2021. It was the first play back in the Harold Pinter Theater. It was my first production of a play, and it was with
Wow.
like legendary theater director Ian Rickson. Um, Incredible cast: Gemma Arterton, Lydia Wilson, Painty Balogun. Like, it was a very huge um, artistic uh, moment in my life. It just was such an incredible experience, and also was just such a magical thing to happen in the middle of such a challenging time. Very intense. Like, it was a lot. It was a very intense time.
Yeah.
And from there, it actually had a regional production in Hartford, Connecticut at TheaterWorks Hartford, directed by Man Teo, who's a great theater director as well. And it was an outdoor production, and the design was incredible. They built this cabin like on this piece of land near the theater, and the audience had to walk like 1,000 steps from the parking lot to where they were going to sit. And the actors had mics, and the audience had headphones, so it was very intimate.
Oh,
Like, it wasn't
wow.
park or anything. So it was just a really beautiful production as well. And hopefully from there there's going to be more. But yeah, it had its first its premiere on the West End, which was an absolutely wild magic thing that happened.
Congratulations. That's just amazing,
Thank
especially after, the whole roller coaster of when it
you.
was
No.
coming to fruition with the pandemic and everything. That's just incredible.
Mhm.
It doesn't surprise me at all. I feel like, you said earlier you kind of tipped into writing, realizing you had a lot to say.
Mhm.
Was there a seed idea that kind of sparked these
Yeah.
characters and this story?
Yeah, I think it really a couple different things. Some of it was climate anxiety on my part and thinking like, so what are we going to do when it's too late to do anything? What's going to happen when we're past that point? I just at that point I didn't know very much. I hadn't done a ton of research, but I was just really curious. Like, will we literally have to go to other planets and see if we can build something new there? Like, is that what's going to happen? And so I'd originally sort of conceived of like the EAs almost as like the more science denying people or something,
Mm,
sort of a more conservative group of folks, and that science at this point says like, well, all of y'all should have gotten on board. We have to go, find somewhere else. And
sure.
then the more research I did, the more I was like, oh no, I'm definitely an Earth advocate. I think we should save this planet. I suddenly became an EA. So it was actually really interesting as like the politics sort of developed of the play. Like my mind sort of changed in the research process.
That's so cool. I mean,
Really cool.
I
Yeah.
think I feel that as a reader, or I guess as an audience of it. It's like, I was trying to explain this to friends of mine, and I said, I wouldn't be able to tell you the politics of the writer because I felt like you did
Mm,
such a great job of showing that all the different sides have really fair points. It's like,
mhm.
it's so easy to try to delineate things into these categories, but really nothing falls into easy categories. There's like
Right,
good and bad in all the quote unquote categories, right? And so
right.
it's such a tricky line to walk, but it really exists in Walden where, you find yourself starting to agree with Cassie about all the
Yeah.
NASA stuff. And then you're like, no, but now I sort of agree about all of the EA stuff. And then you're like, oh my God, I wouldn't want to be still and caught between both,
Yes, totally.
Really,
That
what what is your research process like to be able to kind of get to a place like that? Do you just sit in the library for hours? Is it going down rabbit holes online, or
Well, yeah, there's definitely so much to research online. I was able early on in the process to speak with someone who like was an astronaut candidate in France, who was a botanist, who's doing some of the stuff that Cassie did. So that was actually really helpful. But as far as like, you know, going down a rabbit hole of like space colonization, at the time it was, it was strange during like right before I went to London was when some of the billionaires were like, or we were putting a rover on Mars and billionaires were starting to go to space. All this stuff was kind of coming true in this play that I
yeah,
was like, oh my god, this is really interesting. So there's definitely a lot that I felt I learned reading sort of different arguments as to like where should we be putting our money? Should we be putting it into space exploration or investing in somewhere else, or should we be putting that here? So I love NASA and space expert. Like I'm really interested in all of that, and I'm also really invested in the climate movement, and also learned a lot in the rehearsal process in London. Like I think we also got to speak with Dr. Peggy Whitson, who's an incredible astronaut. We got to speak with her on Zoom. So like there was a lot of research that just sort of helped both develop my point of view, or the different points of view in the play, but also to kind of gave it more nuance as it kind of got closer and closer to production. Um, and then I'll just also say that the sisters, I am a sister, but I have a brother. And I grew up in a family of artists. My dad is a like kind of jack of all trades, writer, director, musician, incredible artist, and my brother is an incredible singer. And I, also wanted to be an actor and also sang. And there was, I felt like so devoted to the art form, and my brother was so good at it. So it was like growing up, there was that tension within me. And now my brother and I are great and kind of on totally different
Good.
paths. But I think there was also, I was really thinking about that question of like, am I going to get to live the artist life I want to live? Should I keep going as an actor? You know, there were all those questions in there as well as I was writing it. Um, so it's a very intuitive or instinctual piece, I guess. Like there's a lot in there that I didn't even realize was in there until I started the rehearsal process. Because with this incredible director, Ian Rickson, there's like no stone unturned. And then you start to see, like, oh my God, that's also in this play. I did not mean to even put that in there, but subconsciously it's in there. So it was a really cool process.
That's fascinating. I was curious because your stage directions are so wonderful. They're so additive to the reading experience. I feel like it really lets you imagine all of the interactions. It felt almost more like reading a screenplay because you know what I mean? Like it's like the
Mm,
world gets so visually set
yeah.
up. And I was curious about your process with stage directions. Like how much of that is stuff that was really loaded in there from you, and where was the blend in terms of once you started to see it on its feet? Like were there things that
Mhm.
shifted once you saw it that you felt like were like, oh, now this should live with the play, or
Mhm.
like the silences that are built in, or
Mhm.
um
Right.
certain movements that are built, you know what I mean? Like how much of that was sort of you imagining it one way and how much of it was the actors and the director of the production sort of started to shape it?
It's a great question. I think if anything, once we started rehearsing it, stage direction started going away
Hmm.
because I felt I learned and sort of was taught through that process how much I can trust the actors and the director with it, and to just let the actor decide the way they want to say that line. That maybe I don't necessarily need every single direction to each actor to let them know how to yeah, how to act it, that they will get to make those choices for themselves. But things like where I put beat or silence, like those are pretty important to me.
Yeah.
So I kept those in because I think it really helps with the rhythm of the awkwardness between the characters, or the tension, the humor.
Yeah.
So a lot of that I think was sort of instinctual, but I think I'm trying to think if there was like an example of something that changed after. I mean, there were a lot of changes seeing it on its feet for sure, like
Or
little cuts here and there, or a new speech for someone. Um, but I think a lot of it was just paring it away so that it can be more and more kind of a collaboration between all of us as artists, and not just
yeah.
me directing it on the page.
Yeah.
So
It's really the words are very economical. Like it
yeah.
feels so real. Like I feel like everybody feels like a real person and everybody has such a clear voice. Um, but I was really struck by how economical it is. Like there's not a wasted word. Is that part of your process? Does it start bigger? Like does it start sort of more like stream of consciousness and kind of gets pared back and pared back and pared back? Or is that kind of how you think is just with an efficiency of
Yeah,
words?
great question. I think they're definitely, like, for instance, the play used to begin with two speeches, one from Cassie and one from Stella, that we're just hearing,
Hmm.
like in darkness. And it was sort of them speaking to each other in a way, but it was also their inner life. And it had been there for a long time. And I was just like, I'll just keep going with this. I kind of liked them, but I also thought this is just the only way I really knew how to begin this play.
Hmm.
And Ian, the director of the West End production, encouraged me to just, maybe we don't need that, because I think we're going to learn these things. We're going to learn about these women the further along we go in the play. Like, let's
Yeah.
just confidently begin in the middle of Stella in the cabin. Like, let's just start there. And but I do think my brain does think. I think economically for sure, or I'm interested in putting words on the page. Sometimes that almost look like poetry at times because the line breaks, and it's not necessarily that the actor has to slow down there, but it's just sort of the thought process. It's breaking up the thoughts. Um, I don't know. It's again sort of an instinctual thing, I think.
Yeah, no, it's really beautiful to read because of that, and because I'm also an actor, I'm
Right.
imagining that all of the words feel like there's that connection to it. Did you feel like your years of experience as an actor really play into how
Yeah,
you approach writing?
I definitely think so because I am definitely very character based in the work, or that's kind
Mhm.
of my way in, and I feel often emotionally connected to them. Like, I'll sometimes be like, very in it. If anyone watching me, right, if anyone was watching me, right, they might be like, okay, something's going on with her. But yeah, I think that it definitely influences also how I hear dialogue, I guess, or just
Mhm.
I feel very attuned to the way people talk. And um, as I'm writing, I can hear the voices more than even see visually things happening, I guess. So I'm hearing
Interesting.
the different ways that the different characters speak. Um, but I do think that actors inherently tend to be pretty good writers in a lot of ways. I think they inherently know story because they've spent so long putting themselves in it and through these journeys. They know when a piece has a great arc for a character or has a journey, and that's all
Sure.
just storytelling. So
Yeah.
um, I think it's a great place. I actually don't fully understand how other playwrights who aren't writers or who aren't actors do it, but kudos to them.
Yeah, exactly. It's true. It's weird because, like, if you've been an actor, you can't unknow being an
I
actor.
know.
So who knows what that's like,
Exactly.
right?
I don't know what that's like, but there are some amazing non-actor playwrights, obviously. But yeah, I'm like, I don't know how you do it. So
When
yeah.
you mentioned earlier, so you said your father is a writer
Yeah.
director as well. Is your
Mhm.
mom an artist as well?
My mom is a speech pathologist, so she's not really in the arts, but very supportive. They were both very supportive of me, through all these years of struggling before some stuff finally like broke through. So.
Yeah. What were those years of struggling in terms of, like, I'm always curious because I feel like everyone always talks about the success,
Hmm.
and sometimes it can feel very disheartening to people when they're in the struggle.
Absolutely.
What was the shape of that? You're like, when did you really know you wanted to be an actor? When did you kind of feel like, no, I want to shift to writing? And what was that? What were those struggles? Like the sort of the story
Yeah.
of that time.
Great question. I think I knew I wanted to be an actor from when I was in a production of Our Town in seventh grade, playing one of the moms. But it was just one of those experiences where I felt so obsessed with rehearsing. I felt obsessed with being in the theater, with the play itself. It wasn't just like the applause or the event of it, it was like the whole process. And I went to school for acting in Cincinnati, University of Cincinnati, CCM. And then I graduated, moved to New York, didn't know what I was doing at all, like was just sort of thrown into the ocean of New York City and worked in restaurants for 10 years and, sort of made my way through that
Wow.
world, which was an
10
interesting
years is a long time to
a
be
long time.
in
Yeah,
restaurants.
exactly. And then and I started writing after I was cast in a play in the Humana Festival, which is this great theater festival. RIP. I think it no longer exists post pandemic, but or post this section of the pandemic, but um, it's a festival where there's like 5 or 6 different plays being done at once, and all of New York would come and see it. Like it was a very cool, just a really amazing festival, and got to be around a lot of playwrights. Sort of got steeped in that new play development process, and was interested, and also was super depressed after that amazing job, and
Mm.
put myself in a playwriting class and just didn't really look back. It just felt like something was clicking. And it also felt like as I wrote, finished my first play, started working on another one, it just felt like doors opened so easily, whereas acting had felt like such a fight the whole way. And there were some doors opening, but it writing was just such a clearer path, and it was making me so much happier. So
That's a
um,
good sign.
that's a great sign, right? Um,
Yeah.
and I think just getting to create the process and getting to be the one who created all of this energy around it was really a profound shift.
What was the playwriting course like? Because, I get asked all the time, not that I'm anyone to ask about this, but, like, what classes should I take? Or what, it's like, I
Mhm.
don't even know where to point people when it comes to taking a writing class or something like that.
Well, it's funny you should mention it. I do teach playwriting classes on Zoom that
Oh,
I
amazing.
do that every month and a half or something, put out a new round of them. But that class was through this amazing writer, Jessica Dickey, who just taught out of her apartment at the time and who's a mentor of mine. She's kind of, she's a very successful writer, so I don't know that she's teaching anymore. But I tend to do that now because I like to, particularly for actors, like teach for actors,
Mm,
because I think I write, like I've said, from such an instinctive place, and I think other people can do that too. It's not doesn't have to be so scary that you don't have to know everything going in. Like I think writing more for TV film, you have to know more. You have to kind of outline everything. You have to send in those outlines to people and everything.
sure. Yep.
Um, in playwriting, I still really like to sort of have a little general idea of where I'm going or who the characters are, and then just get in there on the page and see what happens and go from there. It's a little scarier to do it that way because you're like, okay, like feeling around in the dark for what's going to happen next sometimes.
Yeah.
But I also find that like plays come from such a heartfelt, soulful place in that way. Um, and I think it doesn't have to be so scary to dive in and try writing. So
Sure. I mean, was there a point where it's so interesting to hear that you like get in there and you let the characters lead you in terms of what's happening next? Um, it does sound scary. And but is there a point in that process, especially now that you've written a few things, a few more
yeah,
plays since, so
yeah,
like, is there a point where you're starting to notice like, oh, this is when I start to see the end? Like, do you kind of see the end
yes.
coming?
I think at some points, and now as I'm writing again more for TV film, like I'm trying to train myself to see the end sooner. But I think once you're in the middle, usually in my class, midway through, we start to talk about like a midpoint where everything maybe shifts or something is
Yeah.
revealed, it sort of turns everything around, and then also start to slowly think about possibly an ending and getting to like a character defining choice at a climax, like
Mm,
getting to the place where your character that you've led along this whole journey um, sort of has to make that big decision for themselves. So I do have to, yeah, but every once in a while I'll get right up to the end and I'm like, I don't know, I don't know, I don't know, and then they always something happens,
Isn't it
and
crazy? I mean, listen, I'm a baby writer. I'm not, I feel like I can't even yet call myself a writer, but I've been doing all the bad writing. I'm getting all the bad writing out
are a
so that I can
writer.
get
Come
to the
on, if
good
you're
writing.
doing bad writing, you're a writer. I definitely think
But
so.
I've been working on a project where I had outlined the whole thing,
Hmm.
and that outline worked. It's a film script. The outline worked up until about page 46.
Uh huh.
And then it didn't work at all. I was trying to force the outline. I was like, oh, I don't believe anything. This is just wouldn't happen. These people wouldn't do this. And so I had to
Right.
throw out the outline from there to the end. And so I was in
Mm-hmm.
that situation of just kind of like waiting to see where they took me.
Yeah.
And it was so weird, that feeling of just like, I feel like they're telling me what has to happen. Like I can't
Yes.
explain that to someone, but that's such a weird
It's
phenomenon.
so.
Like they kind of have a soul and they start
Yes.
going against you.
I love Elizabeth Gilbert who wrote Eat Pray Love. I think she's amazing, but I love her TED Talk on creativity and where she really talks about how people used to imagine geniuses outside of themselves and they didn't used to imagine
Mm.
artists themselves as geniuses, but like that the genius came to you. And
Huh.
so there's like less of a pressure on yourself if you are just showing up every day and seeing if they're going to come, seeing if the people are going
Wow.
to come.
Yeah.
And you're like, I'm doing my job. I'm showing up all the time. I'm here. I'm writing. You have to show up too. And it's very woo woo, obviously, but I really kind of believe in it, or it's helpful for me at least. It's helpful for me to think they're going to show up at some point. I just have to
Totally.
keep believing and keep trying to problem solve it and trying to fix this, you know, puzzle, you know,
Yeah. Do you
because
have little like tricks that you rely on in those moments when you feel stuck? It's like, I don't know why, but what I started doing is like when I would feel stuck, it felt too much pressure for me to keep adding on at page, like I'm on page 80. To keep writing at page 80 felt like too much pressure, like it was somehow committing to it. So I'd start a
Mhm.
new document and I would just write a
Yes.
scene from the new document. So I had all
That's
these
great.
documents all over and then was like,
That's
oh, this goes here and this goes here and this goes here.
really
Oh, I need a little
smart.
transition here. But there was something
Yep.
about separating it that somehow got me out of my head. Do you
Mhm.
have little like
I,
go-tos like that?
that's something I do. Sometimes I'll have a document where I have all my notes or dumb, bad scenes that I'm writing, and then I have the other document that then once I get a good one, I'll paste it into. So I just kind of
Right.
have this running long document that's ideas, thoughts. You know, it's sort of a, I don't know, hodgepodge of things that have to do with the piece, but it's not the piece, and that is sort of freeing. It's a more freeing space to be like, well, this doesn't have to count.
Right.
This doesn't have
Yes.
to
Yeah.
really be anything. But I think that's a really good strategy that you have. And I think sometimes also I'll really try to look at like, okay, this character at the beginning is this kind of person. So what is literally the very opposite of that? Not that I'm necessarily going to go there, but how can I push the envelope as far as possible and see who they might become later, or like what
Mm.
might their journey be? You know, I try to look at opposites a lot. Um, to kind of see how, and also to look at other plays and how other plays are written and what structurally people do in play or films, you know, just
Sure.
like, okay, I really like this play, and that play had a twist that I really like. Okay, how did they do that? How could that be put into my play? Um, you know, how could I find a twist? So, okay, I would have to find in the lie. This is actually how I kind of found part of Walden pretty late in the game, like, spoiler alert, but that Cassie is not being completely forthright with why she's there. And then that's dropped pretty late in sort of a climactic scene between the two of them. Um, and that wasn't there for a while. I just knew it was this climactic scene where there was kind of like
Mm.
a physical fight for a while in an early draft. It was like I didn't know what it was going to be, but I had the whole draft then, and then I'm like, okay, this doesn't feel right. Where could the lie be? I feel like there's something, there's some layer here that I don't know.
Yeah.
So if I might start writing this play and I might have the skill to know where I'm going more.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
But I just also say that to be encouraging to people who might be starting writing, because you can write the like kind of bad draft of it and then find that stuff later. It just takes longer and it's more
Sure.
tedious.
Well, you don't know what you don't know when you don't know it. So,
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Totally.
it's really cool to hear that. Do you feel like you have a sense of how many drafts you wrote before you really shared it with people? Like, I don't mean like shared it with people that
I'll
you
share it with
trusted,
people.
but like
Mm-hmm.
really like you were like, I'm sending this to people
Mm-hmm.
as like the thing that I think it is.
I would say at least 5 drafts of it. Um, Probably for that play. Like maybe I had been, I mean, honestly, I probably started submitting it pretty fast because I was just kind of trying to make stuff happen.
Oh yeah.
But didn't get into festivals until like 2018. So that's like 2 years after the first draft.
Wow.
Um, and some of that was the play continuing to get better, and some of it was like meeting the moment or something. Like I do feel
Sure.
like the play has sort of continued to become more and more relevant, for lack of a better word,
Yeah.
or potent or something. So I think I just think you just don't know who's going to connect with your work, is the other thing. Like that is a huge encouraging piece of advice I try to give to people, because I didn't know that Sonia Friedman was going to connect with my play. Like I didn't know you were going to connect with my play. I had no
Yeah.
idea. And
Yep.
so I think you just have to keep putting your stuff out there, as challenging as it is sometimes when you keep getting those rejections. I, as a writer, was just so excited to get like written rejections instead of as an actor where you just never hear anything again. I was like, this is great.
Oh my God, it just shows how abused we all are as
I
actors. The fact
know.
that
Oh
we're
my
like, well, at
god.
least they're rejecting me in writing instead of not
Yes.
just ignoring me.
So real.
God.
It's so real.
Oh, wow. Oof. Man, it just shows you what we all get used to, right? It's like
Oh,
you just kind of adapt to all the
it is
craziness.
bad.
So
Yep.
crazy. It's so interesting because, like, I've spoken to a lot of novelists now,
Mhm.
and it's very different for them because pretty early on they have an editor that becomes kind
Right.
of their partner in crime of like helping guide some of the story or trim things back or rearrange things. Do you have those sort of trustworthy people? Are those your agents? Are those friends? Are they your mentor? Like, do you have that sort of circle of people to do that with?
I have definitely some trusted readers of early drafts or people that I might want to put in a room where I'm hearing a first draft that's just
Mm.
for me. And like we order Thai food and we all sit around. I mean, this is kind of, in the before times, but um, I definitely have those people. And then definitely agents, managers at this point are, very helpful, but I didn't have that for a long time. But directors are also such helpful, cohorts in making the play. Like to get to sit on Zoom before getting to London with Ian Rickson for many hours was
Wow.
just, I mean, masterclass in storytelling and so generous and so helpful. So I think, and in the play development process, the director can and actors honestly can be helpful in showing you, what's there and what's not there, or what's still lacking, what's working, what's not working. Um, but yeah, I'm jealous of that about novelists. That sounds really great.
No, I was like, I feel like I wish every career had that. We
Yeah.
all had an assigned person to help us work through it.
It's so helpful to have that outside perspective that's really just looking out for the piece and can be a little more removed from it.
Right, and they haven't gone through every version of it in your head, right?
Right.
Like you're living with all the versions that ever
Mhm.
existed and all the possibilities that you never even put on the page. And that's
Mhm.
a lot to have bouncing around in there. Whereas like
Yeah.
they're just reading what's on the page and responding to exactly what's on the page, which I think is
Right.
also such a helpful, which is
Right.
probably a similar position for a director to be in with you in
Right.
that situation.
Yeah.
Um, for anyone watching who doesn't know about the play process, it's really interesting in rehearsal because you do table work where you
Mhm.
spend all this time really just talking through it. And this is something that doesn't happen with television or film usually.
Mhm.
But it's a big part of the rehearsal process with play. And as an actor, I love table work. I love that time. I love hearing how everyone's thinking about it. I feel like it gives you all these like shared memories with
Exactly.
everyone, because I don't just know where I'm approaching it from, but I know where, every other actor is approaching it from and their thought process because we've all sort of
Mhm.
spoken it out around the table. And I think there's just such a wonderful history that you create
Yeah.
with all those people and a history that feels relevant to the play.
Mhm.
What's table work like for a writer? I mean, is that terrifying to be like, okay, they're all gonna pick it apart?
I also think it's fun. I think it's a fun moment to get to really dig in, but it can definitely be scary and exposing. Like it can
Yeah.
feel like you're really sorry, there's a beat happening, but it can feel very like someone's looking in your journal or something. But like that was in the process in table work when I started to see some things that I was like, I didn't even realize I put this element of my life in this play. I didn't even mean to do that. Um, yeah, but I do find that process really fun and rewarding. And with this play in particular, I think that idea of shared memories is actually really important for the play because a lot has happened in the past that we are now leading up to, or that we're starting at a place where these characters have such intense relationships to each other, except Cassie and Brian, who are meeting for the first
Yeah.
time. But so in rehearsals, in both productions that I've done of it, actually both directors separately kind of tried to help the actors like improvise and create their own memories with each other so that they had these memories of like what it was like to be at NASA together and or to have these memories with their dad. Like they did some interesting improv, sort of on their own without knowing that the other production had also done that to kind of create these shared memories with each other. It was so fascinating and really cool to see.
Yeah, it's really baked in there. I feel like I don't even know where to start in terms of actually talking about the story because I feel like it's so rich with things going on from moment to moment. And like you said earlier about like even just looking at the way that things are written out, like wanting it to look like poetry at times. It does
Mhm,
feel very poetic,
mhm.
but it also feels like things people would actually say. Um,
Yeah.
I was really taken aback by that and really I don't know, I really enjoyed that. And I felt like part of the reason that it all worked so well is because, you could say that this play is about climate change. You could say that
Mhm,
it's about science or it's about the
mhm.
earth, or you could say it's about be something being set in the future. But really, it's really complicated family dynamics.
Yes.
Like it just that's the backdrop for all of it.
Yes.
But you managed to kind of make all of that research feel like it was like just oozing out of their history, And is that something that takes, again, is that like an intuitive thing for you,
Mhm,
or just over time, is there a layering? It's like as you're learning new things about
mhm.
NASA or learning new things about how you might be able to till the earth once we're past a lot of disasters, like, are
Yes.
you going back through and saying,
Mhm.
oh, this might be where they talk about their feet hurting if they were in space
Yeah.
for too long. And then, oh God, if the cork trees all were
Mhm.
extinct, like, you know what I mean? Like, is that stuff that sort of inspires the initial writing, or does that feel like it kind of starts to get like layered in over time?
So I think it's definitely a combination of both. I think some of that first scene with the three of them, feet hurting, cork stuff, that all is like pretty close to a first draft, or like that is sort of just what came out in a weird way. I had done a little bit of research about NASA astronauts and what happens to them. It was also very inspired by like the Kelly twins experiment, Scott Kelly and Mark Kelly. Mark
Oh,
Kelly is our senator in Arizona, but his twin brother, they both have gone to space, but his twin brother, Scott, I think I'm getting Mark and Scott correct, um, was in space for a year. And then they reviewed their DNA, these two identical twin brothers, and Scott's DNA had changed after being in
from
space for a year.
space.
Yeah.
Whoa.
So that was all really interesting information for them as they think about putting humans in space long term, or what the effects that's going to have on the body. So that was partially what inspired this twin idea and the twin experiment, and putting one against the other and all of that. But I think I am a big fan of like writing the kind of bad version first and then layering back in once I know more about, like, okay, this is the kind of work Cassie's doing. How can I figure out how would you terraform a planet? I'm like sitting here like watching YouTube videos and listening to podcasts about terraforming, and like, how could you do this? But I actually found this video of some woman doing some experiment in like Greenland or something, using tardigrades, this water bears, these like teeny tiny microscopic organisms that can live through all kinds of they're well, what do I say in the play? What, I can't remember now, but they can survive in space and survive coming
Sure.
back down to Earth, and they're sort of indestructible. So just kind of putting those details in. I think Ian said, like, I wonder if the word tardigrade has ever been said on the West End.
Probably
Just like,
not.
probably not. But that all of that came in like sort of a final draft with some of those specifics about what
Mm,
she's doing and how to sort of convey that succinctly is really tricky. But then you have all the dynamics there already, the emotional dynamics, and then
sure.
sort of layering the. I mean, it already was kind of against a big world, like kind of a big sci-fi world, but it's just so focused in on the three of them.
Hmm.
And I think that's part of what seems to draw people to the play in a way, that it's told from such a, I don't know, that it's so zeroed in on them, but there's so much happening outside.
Yeah, 100%. It's really wonderful. What's your daily writing like? Do you have a ritual to it, or is it just you write when you can? Do you have a certain place you like to write, a certain pen you like to write with, or do you always type?
I used to I used to be more of a writer who just like stole time, just like took time when I could. When I had a day off from the bar, I would just kind of like sit and write
Yeah.
all day long. But now I'm trying to get more into like where I'm working on something every day. I'm writing in some way every day. And I am a big journaler. I have tons and tons of filled journals, which I think is always helpful for writers to kind of just dig up the soil there, that see what's
Yeah.
happening and what's going on in you. So I try to trick myself into writing. Usually I'm either like, okay, I'll just write for like 25 minutes, or I'll write for 10 minutes, and then I'll kind of get into it and just keep going. Or I'm like, I'll just transfer what I've written handwritten onto the computer. Like that'll be writing. So I try to do that because sometimes I think just getting there and getting in the zone and getting enough space from everyday life and the tasks you have to do, people in your life, just to get like kind of blinders on and get in that space, I think can be
Yeah.
a challenge for sure.
Yeah, it's tricky. It's like even when I'm setting aside time for it, I feel like there's always something that comes up that's urgent that
Oh
like,
yeah.
threatens that space of time. And you're like, oh no, there can't be another urgent matter today. Like I
No, I
have to
know.
just do it.
Yeah.
Um, Time is flying by here, so I'm gonna actually get into the question I like to ask last, which is, what is the best advice you've ever been given? And it doesn't have to be about writing. It doesn't just the greatest piece of advice that you feel like you've been given.
Hmm. I mean, I can think of a couple things, I guess, that I feel like they're sort of related. One is like very recent, and so it's just the one that's on my mind. Hallie Pfeiffer, who's an amazing TV writer and playwright, and also an amazing actor. I saw this thing that came up on Instagram though that she shared where she had said in a talk once that she tries to play a game with herself called the "No one is ever going to read this" game, where she just really believes no one is ever going to read this. So to me, what that means for me is like both you allow it to be bad, but then you can also allow it to be as personal as you want. Like I get nervous sometimes that I'm going to hurt people's feelings, or that I'm writing something I shouldn't be. I don't know. Like a lot of stuff comes up for me that when I'm getting super personal in my writing, and so just to pretend like no one's ever going to see this, like let me be as mean and violent and upsetting or whatever I want to be on
Sure.
the page. So that, and then I mean, God, I don't know. I feel like I don't know if this is advice, but it just feels like something I want to share for writers who might be um, experiencing going through reviews or criticism or something. Because everybody's a critic, but when the criticism is out there, or like your play goes up and then they're writing about your baby and all the papers and stuff, and you're like, what the hell? Oh shit.
Yeah.
Okay. And Ian, when I called him after some of the reviews came out, which were very good generally, but there are some things that just, any little thing, you're like, oh God. And I just didn't
Right.
have a process because it was my first time, and it was a, very intense thing. But he said, about critics, they, um, he said, they are the bird watchers, but we are the birds and we get to fly. And I just
Oh,
thought that was so beautiful because it's like,
oh,
right, we are here to do the thing. We are here to do the thing, to fly, and everybody else gets to watch and have their thought, but they don't know what it is to be in it and like make this thing. And that's why we're really making it. We're not making it for these other people who are going to say things
I'm
about
making
it.
it for the journey of making it. Yeah.
Exactly.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
beautiful. That's
So
really,
beautiful. It's like, oh my
oh,
God.
he sounds amazing.
Amazing. Amazing. Yeah, can't say enough good things.
Where can people find your playwriting classes,
Oh my
if they
goodness.
were
I
interested?
think I have a link to email about it on my website, but I also post about it on Instagram,
And
such as
what's your Instagram so folks know?
it's at Amy R. Berryman, the letter R in the middle for
Great.
my middle name.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. I cannot tell you how much I love this play. I can't wait to someday see it on its feet. I can't wait to someday see it hopefully as a film.
Thank you
Um,
so much.
and we're huge fans, and if there's ever anything we can do to support you or get the word out when you have got plays coming up or whatever, please let us know.
Oh my gosh, I will. This has been so wonderful. Thank you. This was a really fun conversation.